Hi, I'm Matt Henney with Project Q Atlanta. Welcome to another episode of Q Conversations, our Friday live chat about LGBT a little later in the show. So with that, we'll just get started. So a question for both of you: how have things changed for you personally, just day to day with the coronavirus pandemic? How have you adjusted to it? Stephe,
Well,
you want to take that first?
I'll go ahead and start. Well, for me personally, given my age and that I do have some underlying health issues, that I've basically been sheltering in place since March. And given that I'm not sure how long this recovery is going to take, or the end of this, it's starting to feel like just being under house arrest for people not doing what they need to do to make this end. And I think that if people had followed some pretty simple guidelines earlier this spring, we would already be past this and life would be getting back to normal. So it's drastically changed my personal life.
My business partner Mike Fleming is very proud of you. He has also been quarantining and been very religious about following that in his house as well. Brian, what about you?
Well, it's definitely been a change, and my day job is in the hotel industry, and we took a huge hit, and but at the same time we all still had to go to work. I ended up having to lay off about 95% of my staff, which meant that we as managers had to fill those roles and fill those positions. And you think, well, if you don't have very many guests, then it couldn't be that tough to fill those roles. But keeping a business open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week takes a lot of manpower. So it's definitely been a very stressful situation. I wish I could have stayed at home. There's a lot of things I wish during this process I could have done differently, but unfortunately, like I said, I have a job and I have to get out and work, and I've asked everybody else, stay home. If you don't have to be out, don't be out. If you don't have to go to work, don't go to work. But I understand there's a lot of us that do have to go to work. So just be as careful as we can. This is probably one of the first times in a long time that folks have seen me without a mask on. You see that little stuff going on here.
I was going to ask you, is that a coronavirus beard and goatee?
Yeah, this coronavirus. This is from the rash of the mask. Yeah, so most of the time when I go out, it's covered up. I bet with a friend the other day. I said, catch me out at the grocery store or catch me out in public without a mask on, and I'll give you $1,000. Now I don't have $1,000 to give, so I hope I don't violate that. But I'm very serious about wearing it all the time. You won't see me outside without it on. You won't see me at a restaurant or a store or anywhere. Not that I'm going to restaurants, but if I go for takeout or something, you won't see me without a mask on. And I advise everybody to do that. We wear them here all day at work, all day, every day. And it's just, it's just become a big part of life.
Well, and Brian, for you, COVID-19 has also taken a personal toll. In May, we had a story on Project Q about you testing positive for the virus, which I think you told us then you started showing or seeing symptoms after a city council meeting in May. Will you talk about what that was like and what your recovery was like?
Yeah, and it's actually, I'm still in recovery. It's just not, it's hard to talk about because I honestly, it gets me emotional. So it's hard to talk about because there was a point that I really wondered if I was going to be able to get up the next day. There was times that I really, wondered. I called my attorney and had my will rewritten to make some changes. Because I had not had it updated since my mom had passed, and my mom was listed as my beneficiary, and I needed to make some quick changes because I was worried about whether or not there was going to be a tomorrow. But yeah, so I went to a city council meeting that night. I felt fine. There was, no, they took our temperatures at the door. I was asymptomatic. Came home, felt good that night. The next day started feeling pretty rough, which means for the most part, I didn't catch it at the city council meeting. I had it going into the city council meeting. I just didn't know I had it. And it took me 5 weeks to get back on my feet at home. I was out of work for those 5 weeks and in bed most of that time. Rough process, still seeing a lung doctor every week. I have about 40% lung damage that they're just wondering if it's going to be long-term or if it's a short-term, where it could be reversible. But I'm not getting around like I used to. It's a struggle sometimes to do some of the things that I used to could do. So it's been very, it's been life-changing for sure. And that's why I'm so passionate about telling everybody else, hey, I don't need to go out and share my story with the world to get you to understand, but I'm willing to. I'm willing to share my story because I think if everybody knew, and I had what was considered a moderate case. So, for that to be considered moderate because I wasn't actually hospitalized, I feel very, very bad for folks that have severe cases.
Well, I know that's got to be tough, and I appreciate you sharing that experience because I just think it's important for people that haven't had that personal experience with COVID to hear from others who have, to realize it is a real thing and it is out there and it really impacts people. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Stephe, have you had friends or colleagues that have tested positive or been impacted by COVID?
Yeah. One that comes to mind just right off the top is a good friend of mine, Sarah Riggs Amico, politician that recently, ran for Senate. Her and her whole family ended up with COVID, and I'm not sure they've had as rough a time as Brian has. I have a lot of acquaintances from, social media and just from being a politician that I know quite a few people that have had a really bad time with it. Some of them ended up in the hospital. A few people just didn't make it. And so those are people I'll never see again. And,
right.
And then it just frustrates me to no end when I see other people still pretending like this is like a cold or a flu that in less than a week you get over it and you come out whole on the other side. A lot of people, like Brian was saying, now he's got damaged lungs. A lot of people don't come out whole on the other side of it, but they're listed as having recovered or survived it.
Right. What are you two seeing in terms of the impact of the pandemic on your cities, in your cities?
Well, I know in the city of Doraville, a large portion of our businesses are, of course, the restaurants on Beaufort Highway, and the restaurant industry has just gotten hammered from this. There's already been quite a few of them that have just shut down. I don't know whether they'll reopen after, given that they weren't really set up for takeout. And I think it's going to have, luckily in Doraville, the majority of our tax revenue comes from property taxes and not business and sales tax. I know some of the cities around us, particularly Dunwoody, a lot of their income comes from retail sales, and it's going to have they're going to be really hit hard by this. I'm sure within a couple of years, it looks like we're heading into a recession, if not a depression, and that's never good for city governments trying to survive through something like that.
Sure. Brian, what about in Chamblee?
Yeah, I think we, there was a point where we almost came to a complete shutdown in the city. I mean, it was hard to find too much of anything that was open. Uh, Things have bounced back to a certain degree, but it's only minor in comparison to what it used to be. I'm one of those guys. I don't again being in the industry I'm in, I eat at weird hours, and so I'm always running out for takeout and trying to pick up something on the way home. I seldom cook. My kitchen smells like it's never been used. But I'm always picking up takeout, and so now it's it's sometimes it's a struggle to find something different because only a handful of restaurants are open, and those that are open, they close at a certain time early, a lot earlier than what they used to. But it's definitely not business back to normal in Chamblee. It's hard to find places that are open, and those that are still struggling. I mean, there's a lot of folks that are still not getting out, which is good. I mean, it's the other side of the coin. I mean, you want to support business, but you want folks to stay at home as much as possible too. So it's a tough place for business right now.
Right. Well, so as members of your city council, how do you protect residents who sometimes are pretty defiant that they don't really want your help when it comes to coronavirus? And we see examples of that on the news probably nightly or social media. So how do you balance sort of doing things to keep your city safe and dealing with residents who might be a little less than thankful for the assistance?
It's tough, but I don't give up. I just keep pushing the issue. Folks, I think I'm going to go out on a limb here and say 90% of the folks in our city want to do the right thing. So it's not a hard sell for most folks because most folks are staying home when they can. They're wearing a mask when they're out in public. A lot of times I feel like I'm preaching to the choir because I talk about it so much with everybody. But most folks are doing the right thing. You have a small percentage of people that push back. And I think that's just because of the climate we're in politically. That starts with leadership from the top. And, I don't want to start talking about federal politics and all that kind of stuff. But that when you have somebody at the top that is an anti-masker, you're going to have a small group of followers that follow that lead. And but I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep telling them every time I see them, and they're going to keep cursing me every time they see me. To do the right thing. You can't make somebody do something. I mean, we can talk about the mandates. I know we want to have a little discussion on that too. But Chamblee, we did a resolution that requested everybody to wear a mask. We had an ordinance written up until the very day that the governor said that he had nullified all of the other cities' ordinances. So we tweaked our ordinance and just did a resolution and said, please, we're asking you to wear a mask and to do the right thing.
Right.
At the same time, we kept our ordinance in place, so it's still out there going through its second read process. So at some point, I expect we will have a mandate out there. But right now, we're just asking everybody to just do the right thing. We're going door to door. Our police officers and our code enforcement, they have a copy of the resolution that they're delivering to every business. They've printed window clings that they're giving to each business that says this business requires a mask, City of Chamblee. And we're not getting a lot of pushback. I think most of our businesses want to do the right thing as well. Folks want to keep their employees safe and they want to keep their customers safe. And so most of our businesses are doing the right thing. But we just keep pushing along. You're going to have some folks that don't want to do it. To me, it's no different than stopping at a stop sign. Stop sign tells you to stop. It's the law. You need to stop. The mask ordinance. It's not a law, but it's a strongly urged request that your city is asking you to do, and you should abide by that.
Stephanie, what about you? Are you finding folks are receptive to things that are being done by the City Council of Doraville, or people you finding some folks that are resistant to following common sense methods to keep themselves safe?
I think as this has gone on, I'm seeing more and more people wearing masks. Unfortunately, as Brian said, there's a handful of people that are listening to the federal leadership that's basically saying, masks probably don't do anything. And I was in the Doraville post office the other day, and there was 20 people in the queue to drop off their packages and stuff, and there was one guy standing there not wearing a mask, and you could tell he was just giving everybody dirty looks for them wearing masks, like it's some affront to him that people are trying to protect him from themselves.
Right.
And to me, it feels like that once some folks understood that the mask was for protecting other people and that it really wasn't for protecting them, they were like, why should I care about other people? Which is a sad commentary on where we are as a country right now. And again, I think it's from the leadership has, and the federal leadership has kind of instilled that in people that your main thing you should think about is you and yourself and not other people.
Right. And so Doraville was among several cities across Georgia that put in place a mask mandate. Steffi, what prompted the city to do that?
Well, I'm going to back up a little bit to like in March when at that point the governor hadn't done anything in the whole state. And so many of us went through the process of doing a shutdown of the in-person dining and places that we knew were going to be problematic as far as transmission of this disease. And a week later, after we go through this whole process of coming up with an enforceable ordinance and spending legal fees and all that, the governor comes around and a week later and says, we're going to do this other thing, and we're going to preempt you from doing anything stronger. And this is a really bad precedent because normally the state law sets what I could call the floor of policy. And a good example of this is like the stream buffers. The Georgia state law has a 50-foot stream buffer rule where you can't build anything within 50 foot of the center line of a stream. And for a statewide ordinance, that's great because there's places like Carrollton, Georgia, that aren't very dense that measurement makes sense. But there's nothing in the state law that stops a city like Doraville from reducing that or making it more strict down to a 25-foot buffer, which is what we have. And that's normally how state law works. And with local laws can be stricter, but not less strict.
And so for Doraville, I guess the will of the council was that they wanted to take some sort of action, and the mask mandate was part of that response.
Yeah, and then recently that we did the same thing. We did a mask mandate that, and the idea wasn't to go around ticketing people, and we had actually used some money, some city money, to buy a bunch of masks and given them out to our police officers. And if there was a situation where someone wasn't wearing a mask, they were supposed to give the person a mask. And then if they refused to put that on, we'd give them a warning. And then if they had a second time when they've been given a mask and been warned and they still are violating it like on another day, then they would get a ticket. And again, the governor came in and said, no, you can't do that. You can't, mandate masks. And I can understand that maybe on a statewide thing, if somebody's living out in the country and there's not many people living out there, that maybe a mask mandate wouldn't be necessary. But for them to preempt what we're trying to do in a highly populated urban area to slow the spread of this thing, at least, I think it's ridiculous that they came in and preempted what we're able to do as a local government.
Well, and I wanted to ask you both about that. So just a little bit of background. So several cities have passed mask mandates. Governor Kemp is now in court fighting the city of Atlanta over its mask mandate because his emergency orders prohibit municipalities from putting in place restrictions, COVID-related restrictions that are more restrictive than the measures he's done. Has that hurt your city's ability to protect your residents?
Obviously, it has, and as far as I understand, our mandate's still in place, and I have no interest in lifting it. I know he's suing the city of Atlanta. My understanding was that was more about them wanting to re-shut down restaurants and stuff. I'm not sure if it was directed at the mask mandates, and I don't think he's specifically gone after some of the other cities with them. So as far as I'm concerned, we still have a mask mandate and people need to wear them. The CDC's come out and said that if everybody wore masks for 6 weeks, that this virus would pretty much just die off. And unfortunately, people think it's a hoax or don't think this is real, refuse to wear masks, and they keep transmitting this virus amongst themselves. I'm not sure if this is when this will ever go away, if we don't start behaving like what I consider behaving like an adult.
Brian, what about for you?
Yeah, governing a city is always tough anyway, but it really is tough when you are giving folks two directions to go in. And so when the state is saying one thing and your locally elected officials are saying something different, it certainly doesn't help the cause any. Again, I'm a firm believer that 95% of our citizens want to do the right thing. I think I said 90 earlier, but I'll give that other 5% a little break there. But I think most folks in general want to do the right thing. And so, again, we took it from the approach of we're going out and we're just going door to door and asking. And I think that means something to people. I think, I think it means a lot to have your local folks out there, your police officers, your code enforcement, coming in and asking you instead of telling you. Not that either's right or wrong, but the governor has definitely put us in a very awkward situation more than once this year with these type situations. As Stephanie said, even with the stay at home, we went through this whole process of asking our residents to stay at home, and then the governor saying, well, you don't have to stay at home, at first. So it helps when your state and local leadership are on the same page, for sure. And that's been a struggle. It's been a struggle.
Okay. Well, here is the question for both of you. If you were the governor, what would you do to be fighting coronavirus in Georgia? Who wants to take that big, grand, hypothetical question?
I'll take a swing at it. I mean, I strongly believe that a mask mandating and requiring people to wear masks when they can't socially distance is going to be required to fight this virus and kill it off, because a virus can't survive outside of a host, and if it can't jump between people, it's going to die out. And they can work on these vaccines and all this stuff. It might be a year more before we see this, and we can see how effective this is looking at what other countries that were very strict about their shutdown and their mask mandates. They're all almost on the other side of this. And I know that one of the reasons that we did this mask mandate was outcry from the business community wanting us to do this, because they're trying to get people to wear masks, and they can put signs up, but without it being law, some of these defiant people can just say, you can't make me wear a mask. And it defeats just a few people walking around will defeat the whole purpose of everyone else wearing masks. And they talk about their freedoms. Well, like I said earlier, I'm basically sitting at home in house arrest because these folks feel like that they have the civil right to go around infecting other people and ignoring this pandemic.
We're gonna start a GoFundMe for your bail, Steffe. Governor Mock, what is your plan to fight coronavirus in Georgia?
Governor Mock, I don't think would have to reinvent the wheel. I mean, there's just follow science, just follow logic. I mean, this is not tough. And as Steffe mentioned earlier, what works for one part of the state might not work for the other part of the state. But we've seen other states already do that. We've seen metropolitan areas in certain states go on lockdown and do certain processes that the rural areas have not had to follow until they hit a certain percentage of cases, or the situation got to where they needed to. But at the end of the day, this is not about politics. This is not about the left or the right, or who's right or wrong in regards to their politics. It's about science. And I just can't stress enough to the governor, and I've written him a couple of times. He hasn't written me back, but I have written him a couple of times, and I've just look, follow the CDC guidelines, and even if you don't want to, and trust me, I understand it. It's got to be a tough job being the governor of this state. Your rural areas are completely different than your metropolitan areas. So even if you don't want to put these requirements in place, for Habersham County or somewhere, Cherokee County or somewhere else, that's fine. But look at the metro areas and just help us out with allowing us to do our jobs. You don't have to do it for us if you don't want to, but let us do it for our citizens. Let us make our own decisions. Give us a little bit of home rule, and let us make the choices that we feel is best for our cities. Nobody knows a city better than their locally elected officials. The state doesn't know what's going on in Doraville or Chamblee. They see things from 30,000 feet up.
Right.
And so I would just say, let us, as the governor, if nothing else, just let us do what we were elected to do. Let us do our jobs. Let us protect our citizens. Let us protect ourselves.
Okay. Well, we have a couple of questions, and one of these, Brian, which you said is a segue into one of them. So a couple of questions from the audience. And the first one is, politically, why do you think masks have become such a divisive issue? Steffe?
I think we kind of touched on that. I mean, we're living in a divisive time. We're living in everything has become about politics, and everything has become right and left, and it's very unfortunate. But that comes from the leadership at the top, or the lack of leadership at the top. I think some folks, if they believe in your cause, they're going to follow you to the end. We just hope that on our side, we just hope that folks, the folks that believe in us, the folks that believe in Steffe and I, and the rest of our locally elected officials, I hope they'll follow us instead of following the lead of national politics. It certainly doesn't help when you have a president out there that's, refusing to wear a mask and telling folks that they don't need to wear a mask.
Stephen, any thoughts you want to add to that?
Well, I think when it really became divisive was when the president said, I think people are wearing masks to mock me. And that, that the wearing of a mask is saying that you're anti-Trump. And once he said that basically anybody that is, super supportive of our president, they're not going to wear an anti-Trump whatever. And so when he came out and said that, he was basically telling everyone that, supports him to not wear a mask and to make an issue of it. And now they've doubled down, and people just don't want to back down from it. And it's sad that it's going to cause a lot of people to die. There's really, I just can't understand why science has become political.
Right. So another question from our attendees is, do you envision federal assistance coming for cities, and do your cities need it in terms of the pandemic?
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
I'm sorry. I think we're getting some relief. We did get some CARES Act funding appropriated for us. So in the form of a little bit of money, I believe all of our cities, Doraville included, will be getting some money. But that's not, that still leaves us to make the decisions on what do we do now. We've got the money, but how do we get more testing, or how do we help those who are sick? Or it still leaves us hanging to a certain degree. So other than the CARES Act funds that we're getting, and we are working diligently in Chamblee to put together testing sites. We've reached out to a number of organizations. And as Steffe mentioned earlier, we're going around. Our police officers will be handing out masks and bundles of masks to businesses, and we're going to try to use the money in the right way. But we could certainly have used a more structured guidance in this process.
And as Brian said, there's this CARES Act money that was given to DeKalb County. We're working out how much we're going to share with them with this money. And obviously, DeKalb County does health and human services and things like that, even in the incorporated areas of the city. And so they need to keep some of it for themselves, for their programs. There are some really strict guidelines on what we can and can't use this money for. And so some of it, our hands are a little tight on what we can do with it. But I do think it'll help us, as Brian said, get more testing in, get more masks out, get PPE gear for the first responders, maybe, and those kind of things that will protect the police department and the people that are having to work in our cities through this pandemic.
And one last question. This one's for Steffe. It's a little off topic, but maybe we'll make a little bit of news here. Steffe, you've been quite a force in helping cities around the state pass LGBTQ inclusive non-discrimination ordinances. Any more of those coming down the pike?
I'm excited to hear that Smyrna's actually looking at one. They'll be the first city in Cobb County. And initially, there was some pushback on having gender identity language in their ordinance. And some of the local churches came out and were making a big deal about it. But I'm happy to say the mayor and the city council folks in Smyrna are adamant about putting that language back in, especially after hearing from residents. And so hopefully they'll have a very inclusive policy. And actually, Smyrna was what inspired me to initially do this. Was the case, you may remember, it was on, I think, 11 Alive News, of the landscape company that refused to do work for the two gay guys out in Sandy Springs, and came out and said, we're not going to do work for sodomites or something like, blatantly homophobic, and there was nothing anybody could do. And when Smyrna passes this, that guy whose business in Smyrna, he won't be able to keep doing that, which is, we're actually making a difference with these laws. So I'm very excited. I think Tucker's also looking at one. There's been some pushback by some of the elected officials there, but I think the residents there are going to push them to do one.
That's great to hear about Smyrna.
But there again, sure do wish the state would step up to the plate in this. And this should be something statewide. We shouldn't have to be worrying about this on the local level.
Right.
I know it's frustrating. I mean, I do think they put the hate crimes law in, even though they did specifically left out gender identity in the state hate crimes, and they're claiming it's covered under gender, but it would have been nice to have had, fully inclusive language in the hate crimes bill. But at least we're moving in that direction at the state level too on
Right.
that.
And that's the hate
That was a
crime
big
bill that
step.
was passed in June and signed into law by the governor.
Right. So that's good news for us.
So as we bring things to a close today, I want to thank everyone for taking part. After the event, you'll receive an email with a link to replay it, as well as details about our next live Q&A. And a big thank you to Stephe and Brian for their time today. One last question to each of you. Where can people follow you or find out more information or just keep up with what you're doing?
I'm mostly on Facebook, on social media. And it's just, you can search Stephe Koontz and friend me or follow or whatever. And I'm posting stuff daily, so feel free to follow me there.
You are a very prolific Facebook poster, I have noticed. Brian, what about you?
I would say the same. I spend spend too much time on Facebook. But everybody can find me on Facebook, Brian Mock, or reach out to the city of Chamblee. Go to the city's website. My information's on there. Cell phone numbers available. Call me if you need me.
All right.
And one last thing I want to add is I want to thank my fellow elected officials. I think we've really got a good group of folks now working in Doraville, and I think we're going to see some good changes, and I just appreciate all of them a lot. And I'm sure Brian feels the same way.
Absolutely. We are where we are now because of a dynamic group of folks that I work with, and I appreciate all of them.
Great. Well, everyone stay safe, wear your mask, and enjoy your weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you.